This is just a sample of the audiobook. To get the complete audiobook, access the link posted in the first comment.
There was an explosion of parties, fancy balls, weddings, and general socializing. Judith McGuire mused, "Some persons in the beleaguered city seemed crazed on the subject of gaiety. In the midst of the wounded and dying, the low state of the commissariat, the anxiety of the country, I am mortified to say that there are gay parties given in the city." One evening, as she returned to her rented lodgings after a long day of nursing the Confederate wounded, I passed a house where there was music and dancing. McGuire wrote in disgust, "The revulsion of feeling was sickening. I thought of the gaiety of Paris during the French Revolution, of the cholera ball in Paris, the ball at Brussels the night before the Battle of Waterloo, and felt shocked that our own Virginians, at such a time, should remind me of scenes which we were wont to think of only belonged to the lightness of foreign society. It seems to me that the army, when it hears of the gaiety of Richmond, must think it heartless, particularly while it is suffering such hardships in her defense." What troubled McGuire most were the suppers where cakes, jellies, ices, and meats of the finest kinds were in abundance, such as might furnish a meal for a regiment of General Lee's army. Phoebe Yates Pember, the matron of Richmond's massive Chimborazo Hospital, was equally dismayed. She, too, was shocked at the Richmond social scene. "Besides parties, private theatricals and tableaux were constantly exhibited," she went on. "Wise and thoughtful men disapproved openly of this mad gaiety." For Pember, there was certainly a painful discrepancy between the excitement of dancing and the rumble of ambulances that could be heard in the momentary lull of the music, carrying the wounded to the different hospitals. T.C. de Leon also noted that "the winter was passing in Richmond in most singular gaiety." Officers on liberty from the Petersburg trenches routinely journeyed to the Confederate capital to attend these parties. According to de Leon, "parties were of a nightly occurrence, not the brilliant and generous festivals of the older days," a marked difference from McGuire's observations, "but joyous and gay assemblages of 100 young people who danced, who chatted, who laughed as if there was no tomorrow." Malvina Guest, a Treasury girl who was forced to leave Columbia, South Carolina, because of Sherman's advance, found herself a refugee in Richmond. She was amazed at what she saw in the capital city. "Oh, the seduction, the novelty, the fascination of this life in Richmond! If patriotism is its master chord, pleasure is no less its dominant note." She, too, delighted in the robust social scene in the city, where parlors nightly were full of visitors, officers, privates, congressmen, senators, old friends and new ones, from all parts of the country. Although Richmond was crowded to suffocation, she asked none too rhetorically, "Are there great and somber tragedies going on around us? Is there a war? I thought so before I reached Richmond." Kate Rowland was similarly impressed by the party-like atmosphere. She recorded in her diary that she accepted an invitation to the Randolphs and got a glimpse of the gay world of Richmond. The supper was as elegant and profuse as in good times and must have cost an immense amount of Confederate scrip. Rowland also noted that among those in attendance were Lieutenant General James Longstreet and Captain Raphael Semmes of CSS Alabama fame. T.C. de Leon tried to downplay the charges of debauchery in Richmond. He wrote, "But the short spasm of gaiety was only the fitful and feverish symptom of the deadly weakness of the body and the impenetrable gloom." He went on to note, "The desertions of the army were assuming fearful proportions. Supplies of bare food were becoming frightfully scarce, and even the wealthiest began to be pinched for necessaries of life." A season of gaiety. What struck many Richmonders in the winter of 1864 to 1865, despite inflation, the specter of famine, and the Federals besieging Petersburg, was the city's social scene. There was an explosion of parties, fancy balls, weddings, and general socializing. Judith McGuire mused, "Some persons in the beleaguered city seemed crazed on the subject of gaiety. In the midst of the wounded and dying, the low state of the commissariat, the anxiety of the country, I am mortified to say that there are gay parties given in the city." One evening, as she returned to her rented lodgings after a long day of nursing the Confederate wounded, I passed a house where there was music and dancing.